Sometimes wide and peaceful, sometimes narrow and wild, the Nile is a living artery which cuts through half of the African continent. Here it ends a wild run through the high plateau of Central Africa. It must travel 6,000 kilometers before running into the Mediterranean. The Nile often changes names during the course of its voyage. Here in Uganda, it is called Nile Victoria for a brief stretch. Winding tranquilly for several dozen kilometers, it encounters a narrow bottleneck, a necessary point of passage, Murchison Falls. The Nile's entire mass of water must be engulfed through a gorge barely 7 meters wide. Several kilometers down the way, it regains its ease and peaceful rhythm. Beware of still water, goes the proverb. Here, one is wary of what is lying still in these waters. Seldom showing itself, it is feared and respected by all of its neighbors. The Africans call it Master of the River. Crocodilus niloticus, its Latin name, is the largest of its species, measuring 3 to 5 meters in length. The ancestors of the saurians were already present during the golden era of the reptiles and outlived the dinosaurs. 200 million years of evolution with little change. The crocodiles have inherited most of their ancestral characteristics, particularly their invincible bony plating. In Africa, rivers are always sources of conflict. Here the tension began about 3 weeks ago, when the females laid their eggs on the banks. There are about 60 days of incubation left. For the females, this means 60 more days of fasting as they spend their time surveying the nest. In any case, tensions and conflicts do not prevent them from living a long life. With scales blackened with time, this female is over 100 years old. This grande dame shares the bank with a young lass, a 30-year-old female. Contrary to appearances, females do not incubate their eggs. The eggs lay at rest in the cool depths of a hole dug for the purpose, where the temperature stays between 30 and 35 degrees Celsius. Once this task is completed, all that is left to do is wait. Waiting, but always with an eye open. The female must keep watch on her eggs, never slackening her vigilance. It is the only way to protect them from audacious and sly predators. Here is the female crocodile's worst enemy, the Nile Monitor, an attentive and efficient predator who swallows up eggs scrupulously and arbitrarily. This tiny Nile Monitor of 1.5 meters, distant cousin of the Komodo dragon, is in the habit of waiting for dawn to break into action. This one has just finished its morning sunbathing. A gulp of water, and it will be ready to go hunting. The Nile Monitor is patient. It is hot outside, and it knows that the moment will come when the females will slacken their guard when they return to the water for refreshment. First, a quick scan of the territory to define the perimeters of the search. The Nile Monitor is a fine bloodhound with a sensitive nose. During the egg-laying, the female crocodiles deposited odoriferous secretions in the nest so they could easily find the nest again after a refreshing swim. This odor provides a precious clue for the Nile Monitor. But beware of informants. These armed lapwings have a contract with the masters of the river. In exchange for the right to nest on the banks and the protection of the crocodiles, they keep watch on the eggs and sound cries of alarm upon the arrival of an intruder. The kingfishers take their role of lookout so seriously that they take turns nosediving at the Nile Monitor to peck him with their beaks. These repeated aggressions are surely exasperating, but not dissuasive enough. The Nile Monitor continues its search. Only the arrival of a crocodile could make this enemy scatter. Eyes and nostrils protruding on the surface of the water, a low profile. Discretion, the other strong point of the crocodile. No one ever sees it approaching. 2 pairs of nostrils are better than 1 when it comes to finding eggs on such a vast beach. Continuing their search, the 2 Nile monitors gather and devour all the carcasses they find along the way, not suspecting a thing. One of the intruders had a little fright. This does not stop it from hastening to the site. The surprise was enormous for the second intruder. In 3 strides, the female crocodile hoisted her 900 kilograms up onto the bank. But the Nile Monitor is a quick creature. Sure of its own agility, it refuses to scatter. Once it is on the scent of eggs, the Nile Monitor is not one to renounce. The eggs are quite close by, buried somewhere, but where? A few old shells are strewn about, making it all the more exciting. The centenarian female has returned to her watch. She does not make the least effort to chase away this insolent creature, knowing that her presence alone is enough to dissuade it. The Nile Monitor decides to be reasonable. It will not find any crocodile eggs today. Might as well return to the forest and steal eggs from bird nests. It is generally believed that crocodiles adore laying lazily in the sun. In fact, as with all cold-blooded animals, they need an external heat source to raise their body temperature, which must be maintained at 26 degrees Celsius. This requires constantly alternating between sunbathing and refreshing swims. When the heat becomes too intense and nobody feels like moving, all they need do is open their mouths to cool off. The exposure of mucous membranes to the sun facilitates the cooling process through evaporation. The spur-winged plover also have an agreement with the crocodiles. As they groom and bathe, they survey the surroundings. It's quite an art being a reptile. Because of their thermoregulation system, they must regularly alternate between heat from the sun and cool of the water. Each must find the proper dose. This rolling thunder announces a crucial event for all of the inhabitants of the river and its banks, the rainy season. It is the beginning of April, and torrents of water will fall for several weeks in this equatorial region of Africa. The Nile widens at a phenomenal rate. One morning, everything subsides. The water stops as quickly as it came, leaving fish stranded in tiny ponds of water. Fishing has never been this easy for the tufted heron and the Egyptian geese. The kingfisher is also delightfully surprised. Even those enormous fish, the perch of the Nile, were caught by the surprise of the sudden subsidence. This particular one, stranded on a sandbar, arouses much greed, especially among the famished female crocodiles still waiting for their eggs to hatch. They are tempted to swim a few strokes in search of this carcass. But is it wise to desert the nest for such small gain? In any case, hunger is making them nervous. The tension rises. Hierarchy is an essential part of crocodile social life, and it exists as much among the males as among the females. In order to avoid mortal combat, they settle conflict using body language with postures of submission and intimidation. In this way, the young female needs only lift her head slightly to express her resignation, giving priority to her senior. The crocodiles of the Nile are very fond of the perch, which can weigh up to 60 kilograms. They represent 80% of their food, but they are capable of capturing and eating just about anything from a frog to an antelope or even a buffalo. Only the hippopotamus escapes their powerful fangs. The other female refuses to be left behind. She too has just spotted a dead fish. One fish, even 2 or 3, seems a bit meager for such a mastodon. But the digestive system of the crocodile allows it to assimilate 60% of the energy contained in its nutriments. Consuming a minimum of energy to maintain the desired body temperature, its caloric reserves go a long way. The 2 females were not wise in deserting their nests. The Nile Monitor has returned, only this time it has decided not to leave empty-handed. The Nile Monitor is burning hot. Just a few more steps and a bit of digging will suffice to take the eggs from their nest. To the dismay of lookouts on the riverbank, it has achieved its goal and will shortly begin to feast. The Nile Monitor is the only saurian to open its throat wide enough to swallow prey which seem much too large. It is estimated that the Nile monitors are responsible for 50% of the destruction of crocodile eggs. This is no longer mere arsony. It is a veritable carnage. The Nile Monitor is capable of devouring an entire clutch of eggs in less than an hour. The lapwings can sing away, but there is no one to chase away the pillager. The female crocodiles are also in the middle of satiating their hunger. Unaware of the events taking place on the bank, they continue to plow the river in search of perch. The odor of the stranded carcass, sitting for several hours, has attracted the attention of another Nile Monitor. Above all a scavenger, the Nile Monitor can ingurgitate any edible finding. Even so, this one is a little big, and someone else is already eyeing it. Meanwhile, the nest pillager has engulfed almost all of the eggs. The indignation has reached its limit with the lapwings. Their cries of alert have finally been heard. The female returns towards her nest, abandoning all other concerns, but at her own pace. On land, crocodiles have neither the speed nor the agility they are famous for in water. In urgent need, they can gallop at 20 kilometers per hour. But they easily lose their balance and resort to a means of locomotion better adapted to their morphology. The young female, alerted by the cries of the lapwings, is unable to arrive any faster to the site in order to save her clutch of eggs. Luckily, the crocodiles of the Nile are particularly prolific. A female can produce between 60 and 80 eggs per year. The perpetuation of the species is assured, even if only one of the thousands of eggs she lays in her life hatches. In other words, as scandalous as it seems, the pillaging of the Nile Monitor is not a real threat to the species. The brawny intervention arrives too late. The young female will not have one single baby this year. Surely the female has not examined her nest very closely. Believing that there are a few eggs left, she begins to camouflage them in case of the return of the Nile Monitor. The Nile Monitor is so satiated that it is unable to swallow the last crocodile embryo. The hippopotami, having spent the entire night grazing on the banks, return to the river just before dawn. Sun is the only thing they fear. The cohabitation of hippopotami and crocodiles goes rather smoothly, provided that each respect the rules of peaceful coexistence. When conflict arises, the crocodiles use their powerful jaws to instill fear into the hippopotami, who in turn count on their stoutness and corpulence to impress the crocodiles. It never goes any further. Sunrise is always awaited impatiently by the fishing eagle. As soon as the sun begins to shine on the surface of the water, it begins to lie in wait. The centenarian female has just heard the signal of her impending liberation, a call, the cry of the first babies to have reached maturity, still inside their shells, buried 20 to 30 centimeters underneath the sand. She will have to dig, uncover the nest, so that the young can hatch. Evidently, the yelps of the baby crocodiles have attracted one of the Nile monitors who was prowling about the vicinity. She continues to dig, always keeping an eye on this sly intruder, just waiting for the opportunity to seize a hatchling. female will continue to excavate in the sand for more than 4 hours. It is a colossal job given her corpulence. In the end, the Nile Monitor does not have the patience to wait any longer. It leaves, certain that sooner or later, one of the young will stray or get stepped on by this 1-ton monster. With incredible gentleness, the mother seizes the firstborn within her jaws, usually lethal on all other occasions. In fact, at the base of each tooth is a pressure detector, permitting the female to moderate her grasp. Under the weight of the hatchlings, her tongue hollows, forming a slight groove which can contain about 20 babies. She will carry them in this way in several batches all the way to the river. The first people to have observed the behavior of crocodiles believed the females devoured their newborns. This could not be further from the truth. Of all the reptiles, the crocodiles are the most attentive towards their young. Once all the young have reached the river, the father and mother will watch over their young for 11 or 12 weeks. The eldest has definitely broken all records. She has put a batch of 30 inside her snout. She now takes them among the water lilies in a safe place she has found. 2 or 3 trips are needed to transport the entire family. Waiting for their turn, the newborns in the nest continue to hatch without much difficulty. Unknowingly, they already prepared their exit from the shell. Throughout the entire incubation period, the embryo plays an active role in its own development. It rejects carbon dioxide, causing a chemical reaction that renders the eggshell porous to oxygen and thus easier to pierce. Unlike birds and mammals, crocodiles do not have gender chromosomes. Therefore, the gender is not determined at fertilization, but rather during the incubation. It is essentially related to the temperature of the nest. Above 31 degrees Celsius, there will only be males. Below, only females. Since all of the eggs are not buried at exactly the same level in the sand, both sexes are always present in a brood. Miniature adults. All elements are present: shape, color, scales, claws. The only difference is in the size. 15 centimeters long after hatching. 15 centimeters of fresh flesh, multiplied by 15 or 20 or 30, seems like a steal for the Nile Monitor. The same one is still on the prowl. The newborns are lucky that the Nile Monitor has found a dead baby crocodile in its path, most likely crushed by its mother on her way to the river. The female returns for the third and last mouthful of babies. For nearly a century now, this female has returned each year at the same season, to the same place, to accomplish her duties toward her species. With many years of experience, she has perfected her gestures admirably. All of the young are now assembled in a nursery, among the water lilies. As adults, crocodiles are practically invincible, but their youth is not so easy. If one of the young were to leave the nest, it would not last long. Fishing eagles, snakes, Nile monitors, herons would swallow it up in one mouthful. Despite the parents' vigilance, only 3% of the babies will make it to adulthood. A young Nile Monitor has just spotted the creche. It has the instinct of a predator, but lacks experience and an awareness of danger. The Nile Monitor is as agile in water as it is on land. It swims rapidly and quietly, and can easily escape even the most attentive eye. But this mother crocodile is observing its every move. The mother has missed her target. The young Nile Monitor was exceptionally lucky and had quite a fright. It regretfully gives up on this formidable meat safe, too well surveyed. In the river, the seemingly placid hippopotami are also a great danger for baby crocodiles. When they stroll their 3 to 4 tons across the marshes, it is not a good idea to cross their path. When one of these mastodons approaches, finding a refuge becomes a first priority. The baby crocodiles are beginning to gain confidence. They have learned to catch insects and frogs. But there is one thing they have not yet done since they have been in the nursery. touch land, to finally walk on solid ground, to discover the joys of the riverbank, to learn the art of sunbathing. With her young exposed and visible, the mother crocodile must double her vigilance. Mid-May, as we approach the rainy season, the frequency and violence of storms, which hit mostly in the evening, increase. The Nile is not only the longest river on Earth, it is also the most mysterious, with origins that were hidden for a very long time. It took the audacity and tenacity of many explorers, such as the famous Dr. Livingstone, to discover its sources in the heart of Africa. The craze of the sources of the Nile was whispered about for entire generations, becoming a veritable obsession. Finally, in about 1910, it was discovered that it gained its force and power in Burundi, in a place called the Mountains of the Moon, where the name alone makes one dream. The rains have ceased, but upstream of Murchison Falls, they have transformed the ordinarily calm Nile into a furious torrent. Needless to say, these yearly overflowings cause a great deal of devastation. Buffalo, antelope, warthogs, and other animals grazing on the banks were carried away. Drowned animals drift downstream, like this buffalo. For the crocodiles, the rainy season is the season of abundance. Usually contented with fish at other seasons, here they are truly satisfied. They merely sit in the middle of the river, and dozens of carcasses come floating their way. Here they come, rushing from all parts, attracted by the carcasses. But this buffalo is too big. Impossible to dismember it in the water. They will just have to wait for it to run aground. The hippopotami are troubled by the assembly of crocodiles. Tension rises among the troop. On the riverbank, a dominant male reigns on top of a log, approximately 50 meters in length. Beware to anyone who dares to approach. Hippopotami can inflict mortal wounds among themselves with their canines. Generally, these scuffles do not create any victims. The heaviest one always has the last word, period. In order to eat the buffalo that has finally run ashore, they must exercise team effort. Despite the fact that their jaws are able to seize prey with extraordinary force, they are unable to dismember and grind fresh flesh. Crocodiles are obliged to wait for the prey to begin decomposing and work as a group in order to dismember the carcass. The dominant male is responsible for giving the signal for the rush for the spoils. Some keep a firm grasp of the spoils, while others rotate frantically in order to break apart the bones and tear off large pieces which they ingurgitate whole. Why are these powerful beasts unable to chew their prey? Their razor-sharp canines overlap in such a way as to hinder the lateral motion that grinds prey. The crocodiles are thus forced to swallow everything whole. Internal organs, skin, tendons, everything will be swallowed, including the horns. Like birds, they ingurgitate stones from time to time to facilitate their digestion. These stones stay in their stomachs and help to grind up any food that was not chewed in the mouth. Digestive acids will finish the process. Horns, hooves, manes, and tendons will all disappear under their effect. With a medium-sized prey, such as a gazelle or an antelope, the cutting up is easier and can be carried out alone. The crocodile clutches the animal in its snout and shakes it violently until it is completely dismembered. With larger carcasses, group cooperation is indispensable. All parts of the body are used to carry out the dismemberment. Their legs are short but robust and are needed to keep equilibrium. The powerful tail allows the crocodile to multiply the force exerted on the prey. In the Nile, there can be up to 40 or 50 crocodiles on one sole carcass. But the feast does not take place in anarchy. For lack of room, they cannot all tear off parts of the carcass at the same time, so they wait their turns at a distance. This cooperation, carried out calmly and without brawls, demonstrates a certain degree of social organization, which does not exist in other reptile species. It is mistakenly believed that the crocodile prefers spoiled meat to fresh meat. Its stomach being no larger than a basketball, it cannot ingurgitate large quantities of food at one sitting. Having eaten its fill, it is known for hiding pieces of meat under rocks or in caves as if it was hanging game. False. It is simply setting it aside for later. The quantities of protein absorbed during these feasts are stocked as fat within the tail and along the back. This explains why crocodiles can fast for several months. They only eat about 50 meals a year. A large crocodile of the Nile can even go 2 years without food. The end of the feast. Within 2 hours, the buffalo was ripped to shreds like an ordinary rag doll. There is positively nothing left. Three months have gone by, and the rainy season becomes a vague memory with the declining river. On the banks, the dragonflies warm themselves in the sun. They keep high to protect themselves from the increasingly voracious young crocodiles. While some are still attached to the family, others depart in search of adventure. It is not wise to desert the family circle so soon. In the groove of a wave, one can end up face to face with a perch of the Nile. This voracious predator devours an infinite number of young crocodiles. Several weeks later, it's time for an assessment. The numbers do not lie. Of the 80 crocodiles hatched on the bank, only one has survived. In the beginning, it will grow at the phenomenal rate of 30 centimeters per year. If it survives, escaping all the dangers in store, especially humans who hunt for its hide, it will still have to wait about 10 years to reach adulthood and to attack a ruminant. The day will finally come when, on the banks of the Nile, the crocodile will in turn give life and become the superb beast which evokes the armed warrior and the reigning master of the longest river on earth.